Welcome to Now Documentary. Today we're covering the aftermath of the Diddy case. In 2024, US federal prosecutor Damian Williams announced that the government would charge Diddy with 3 crimes: racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, as well as interstate transportation for illegal sexual activity. Later, after an additional anonymous victim identified as Jane Doe was added to the case, Diddy ultimately faced 5 charges in court. Among them, the most significant was the first charge, racketeering conspiracy. In legal terms, this charge is commonly referred to as RICO. In the 14-page indictment, RICO alone accounted for 11 pages. If convicted, the maximum sentence for this charge would be 20 years in prison. Moreover, if the racketeering involved serious crimes such as robbery or murder, the sentence could be enhanced to life imprisonment. The second most serious charge against Diddy was sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion. A conviction on that count would carry a mandatory minimum sentence of 15 years, with a maximum of life in prison. Most people already know how the case turned out. On the 2 most serious charges, Diddy was found not guilty. He was convicted only on several comparatively minor charges, offenses that would not result in a long prison sentence. For many people, this verdict came as a shock. Starting last year, negative news surrounding Diddy seemed endless. From the long-standing controversies tied to the shootings of Tupac Shakur and the notorious B.I.G., to the nightclub shooting involving Jennifer Lopez, and later the so-called white parties and the infamous freak-off events, Diddy's name became entangled with scandals spanning much of the entertainment industry. Any celebrity who had been close to him was scrutinized by the media. Rumors, leaks, and gossip flooded the news cycle. At the time, it would not be an exaggeration to say that Diddy had become public enemy number 1, someone everyone was eager to condemn. And when many people, myself included, believed that this was the end for him, reality delivered a sharp wake-up call. Out of curiosity, I wanted to understand what really happened. Was it true that in the United States, money can buy anything, even the ability to overpower the Department of Justice and federal prosecutors? Or was there something in this case that the public had misunderstood all along? Had Diddy been wrongfully accused? Today, we turn our attention to the courtroom itself to see what actually unfolded during the trial, and Cassie. At the time, the public had no idea about the complicated history between them. But that moment reportedly infuriated Cassie, even though they had been separated for years, and it became the spark that ignited everything that followed. Diddy, however, remained unaware and continued living comfortably within his own world. In September 2023, Diddy released his 5th studio album, The Mayor of New York, and the city symbolically presented him with the key to New York City. 2 months later, in November 2023, Cassie filed a civil lawsuit against Diddy, accusing him of years of domestic abuse, coercion, and sexual assault during their relationship. Just 1 day later, Diddy's legal team reached a settlement with Cassie for $20 million, bringing the case to an abrupt end. What Diddy did not anticipate was that Cassie's lawsuit would open a Pandora's box, one that could not be easily closed. Soon after, another anonymous victim, identified as Jane Doe, filed a separate civil lawsuit against Diddy. This time, Diddy did not immediately seek a settlement. His legal team likely realized that if every accuser followed the same path, no amount of money would be enough. What Diddy didn't know was that an even bigger problem was already taking shape. The US federal government had begun to focus its attention on him. After several months of investigation, on March 25, 2024, agents from the Department of Homeland Security carried out coordinated raids in Los Angeles and Miami. Armed agents surrounded Diddy's mansions, even deploying armored vehicles. 2 months later, CNN aired surveillance footage from March 5, 2016, filmed inside a hotel. Footage that poured fuel on the fire surrounding the case. 2 days after the video aired, Diddy issued a public apology, stating that he should never have behaved that way. 4 months later, on September 16, 2024, Diddy was arrested at a hotel. While awaiting trial, he was held at the notorious Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. He attempted to post $50 million in bail, but the judge denied his request. From here, we'll walk through the trial itself, in chronological order, to understand exactly what happened inside the courtroom. On May 12, 2025, the first day of trial, Diddy's courtroom appearance shocked many observers. The meticulously styled hair, designer outfits, and flashy jewelry he was once known for were gone. His hair had turned grey, wrinkles were visible on his face, and he wore a plain, almost austere outfit. He looked as though he had aged decades overnight. Some people even compared his appearance to Morgan Freeman. It was clear that this presentation was intentional. His legal team likely hoped to strip away the aura of celebrity and distance, replacing it with an image that felt more ordinary and approachable, one that might invite sympathy from the jury. During the early days of the trial, Diddy was seen repeatedly looking toward the jurors, possibly attempting to make eye contact. After being warned by the judge, he became noticeably more restrained. For most of the proceedings, he showed little outward reaction to the statements made by either side or to the testimony of multiple witnesses. At most, he would nod or shake his head slightly. Most of the time, he sat quietly, writing or sketching on paper. Only when his gaze met that of his family did he appear energized again, his eyes briefly lighting up. The first speaker for the prosecution was Assistant U.S. Attorney Emily Johnson. She argued that over several decades, Diddy had used his wealth and influence in the entertainment industry to build a vast organization. Through employees and associates, she claimed, he exploited, coerced, and extorted multiple victims, committing crimes that included kidnapping, arson, drug distribution, sex trafficking, bribery, and obstruction of justice. Johnson stated that Diddy referred to these criminal activities using terms like freak-offs, hotel nights, or wild king nights. According to the prosecution, these events occurred monthly or even weekly across different states and hotels. She emphasized that these activities formed the core of the government's case and explained why the matter was before the court. Diddy's defense attorney, Tenny Geragos, offered a sharply contrasting opening statement. She described Diddy as a complex individual, but insisted that the case itself was not complex at all. She framed it as a story about love, jealousy, infidelity, and money. A story about adults making voluntary choices within consensual relationships. Geragos argued that while the government repeatedly claimed the case was not about Diddy's private life, the evidence would show that it was, in fact, entirely about his private life. The prosecution's first witness was Israel Flores, a hotel security guard involved in the 2016 hotel incident. Flores testified that he received a call from the hotel front desk reporting that a woman on the 6th floor needed assistance. When he arrived, he saw Diddy sitting on a chair, staring at him. Flores said the moment startled him, and for a brief second, they stared at each other in silence. Flores then watched as Diddy stood up, grabbed Cassie, who was lying on the floor, by her clothing, and dragged her toward room 602. Flores followed and discovered another person inside the room, dressed entirely in black and sitting on the bed. This individual was later identified as Jules, someone Diddy had arranged to provide escort services and perform sexual acts with Cassie. As Flores prepared to leave, Diddy called out to him from behind and offered him a large sum of cash in exchange for keeping quiet about what he had seen. The court did not disclose whether Flores accepted the money. Flores testified that he then approached Cassie and asked what had happened. He noticed that one of her eyes was badly swollen. Cassie told him that she just wanted to leave. The next witness was Daniel Phillip, a male exotic dancer. Phillip testified that beginning in 2012, Cassie paid him on multiple occasions to have sex with her. At one hotel, Cassie personally opened the door and asked whether he was willing to participate in sexual acts on camera. She told him it was her birthday and that her husband wanted to give her a special gift. She also asked if he would mind applying baby oil to her body as part of a massage. Phillip said Cassie initially mentioned a standard $200 tip, but instead handed him several $1,000s, telling him the money was his to keep. During these encounters, Phillip noticed that Diddy was present, watching and directing their actions like a film director. Phillip testified that these performances occurred many times afterward, usually initiated by Cassie via text message or phone call. He also recalled moments when Diddy lost his temper. On one occasion, Diddy threw a bottle toward Cassie, smashing it against the wall, then grabbed her by the hair and dragged her into another room. After the door closed, Phillip could hear Cassie screaming and the sound of Diddy slapping her. Another male performer, Sherry Hayes, known by the nickname The Punisher, provided similar testimony. Hayes said that starting in 2012, he helped Diddy and Cassie prepare hotel rooms, setting up candles, baby oil, towels on beds and couches, before participating in sexual performances. Like Phillip, Hayes testified that Diddy would observe and give instructions during these encounters. From the second day of trial onward, the proceedings largely centered on the prosecution's key witness, Cassie Ventura herself. At the time, Cassie was in the late stages of pregnancy, nearly 9 months along. On the stand, she described her relationship with Diddy, explaining that over the years, she had never fully felt integrated into his family life. When they traveled together, Diddy often went with his children while leaving her behind. Prolonged isolation and Diddy's open relationships with other women made their relationship deeply unstable. Cassie testified that Diddy had a violent temper and frequently resorted to physical abuse, especially during periods when he suspected she was involved with Kid Cudi. Regarding the freak-offs, Cassie stated that Diddy introduced the idea during the first year of their relationship, when she was only 22 years old. She described feeling confused, anxious, and overwhelmed, but also believed that participating would make Diddy happy. Caught between fear and emotional dependence, she said she gradually went along with it. Cassie explained that during these events, Diddy acted as an observer and director. At times, however, he would suddenly become enraged and physically assault her. She said she felt unable to refuse participation, fearing retaliation and damage to her career. She believed she was completely under his control. When asked about the state of hotel rooms after these events, Cassie described melted candle wax everywhere, spilled alcohol mixed with urine, and sometimes blood. When prosecutors asked why there was blood, Cassie explained that the events often happened spontaneously, sometimes even during her menstrual cycle, regardless of her physical condition. However, as compelling as Cassie's testimony appeared, subsequent evidence introduced a different dimension to the story. Despite Cassie's testimony portraying herself as a victim, a series of text messages between her and Diddy introduced another side of the story. The messages showed that Cassie had, at times, actively expressed interest in participating in the freak-offs. In one message, she wrote to Diddy that she would lie by the pool sunbathing and wished they could have another freak-off before he left. She added that her menstrual cycle had ended, followed by a sad face emoji. In another exchange from September 2012, when the two were already discussing a breakup, Diddy asked Cassie whether they should have one last freak-off that night. Cassie replied that she did not want it to be their last, but rather the first freak-off of the rest of their lives. These messages suggested that Cassie was not always a passive or unwilling participant. At times, she appeared to be actively engaging and even initiating the idea of these encounters. The prosecution argued that this behavior could be explained as coerced consent, claiming Cassie acted willingly out of fear, emotional manipulation, and psychological control. However, as more evidence surfaced, this explanation appeared less convincing to some members of the jury. In another text exchange dated November 19, 2018, after the couple had already broken up, Cassie messaged Diddy saying that she knew he would never hurt her again, that she missed him, and that without him, she felt lost. Diddy replied by pointing out that she was the one who had ended the relationship, questioning whether she was trying to reconcile. Additional messages showed Cassie comparing herself to Gina and the nanny Nikki, both of whom were also romantically involved with Diddy at various points. Cassie expressed jealousy and referenced the fact that she had been with Diddy for 11 years. These messages indicated that even after the relationship ended, Cassie continued to feel emotionally attached to him, and at times nostalgic about their past, including the freak-offs. For many observers, this evidence challenged the public narrative that Cassie had been desperate to escape the relationship and had been completely powerless to leave. While it did not negate allegations of abuse, it complicated the portrayal of her role in the events. After 5 full days of Cassie's testimony, the trial moved on to its 6th day, when another witness took the stand. She was a close friend of Cassie, and also an artist signed under Diddy's label. In court, she testified that she had personally witnessed multiple incidents of physical abuse committed by Diddy against Cassie, including slapping, hair-pulling, choking, and kicking. She stated that these incidents sometimes occurred even in public places. The witness testified that in 2010, at a restaurant in California, she saw Diddy punch Cassie hard in the stomach in front of her. She also claimed that Diddy had threatened her and other artists, warning them not to speak about Cassie's injuries or the abuse they had witnessed. When asked what she believed those threats meant, she said that given Diddy's history of violence, she understood them as threats of being killed. She further testified that Diddy frequently used illegal substances, claiming she had seen him consume marijuana, cocaine, ecstasy, and various pills. During cross-examination, Diddy's defense team challenged her credibility, pointing out multiple inconsistencies in her previous statements to police. For example, she initially claimed Diddy struck Cassie with a frying pan, then later revised her statement to say he had only attempted to hit her with it. In fact, she had reportedly provided 4 different versions of the frying pan incident. The defense also highlighted that she had left Diddy's company in 2011, yet claimed she continued to fear him years later. They questioned why, if she truly feared for her life, she had voluntarily reached out to Diddy after leaving the company, requesting to return to work for him. They further noted that her lawsuit against Diddy was filed only after Cassie initiated her own lawsuit, suggesting the possibility of financial motivation. The witness denied this, stating that she was only seeking compensation for work she had previously done. The court then moved into the 7th day of testimony. Cassie's mother, Regina, took the stand. She testified that on December 23, 2011, she received an email from Cassie stating that Diddy had threatened her. According to the email, Diddy demanded $20,000 and threatened to release 2 explicit videos of Cassie if the money was not paid. Regina testified that she followed the instructions and transferred the money. However, 4 or 5 days later, Diddy returned the full amount. That same day, one of Diddy's personal assistants, David James, also testified. His testimony focused on arranging Diddy's private activities, including purchasing alcohol, lubricants, and items such as baby oil. He explained that when booking hotels, Diddy personally reviewed and signed off on the bills, often avoiding company accounts and instead paying in cash. James stated that Diddy regularly carried more than $10,000 in cash inside a Louis Vuitton bag. James also testified extensively about Diddy's substance abuse, stating that Diddy kept a separate bag containing approximately 25 to 30 different drugs, including edibles, Tylenol, ecstasy, and various weight loss medications, some without labels. James said that to obtain certain prescription drugs, Diddy would sometimes use the names of his assistants rather than his own. On the 8th day of the trial, Diddy's former personal assistant, George Kaplan, took the stand. His testimony largely echoed that of David James, describing how hotels were booked, how rooms were prepared, and how alcohol, lubricants, and other related items were arranged in advance. On the 9th day, rapper Kid Cudi testified. He was the man previously rumored to have been romantically involved with Cassie during her relationship with Diddy. Kid Cudi stated that he met Cassie in 2008 and that they briefly dated. In 2011, while Cassie was still in a relationship with Diddy, Kid Cudi said they had a short-lived romantic involvement. When Diddy found out, he became extremely angry, which Kid Cudi linked to the later Porsche arson incident. Kid Cudi testified that on the morning of December 22, 2011, at around 5:30 a.m., Cassie called him in a panic, telling him that Diddy had discovered their relationship and that she was afraid of what Diddy might do. She asked Kid Cudi to come pick her up immediately. As Kid Cudi was leaving his home to get Cassie, someone broke into his house. The court did not specify whether any items were stolen. A few weeks later, on January 9, 2012, Kid Cudi's Porsche was set on fire while parked outside his home. Police photographs showed that the perpetrator appeared unable to open the car doors, climbed onto the roof, cut it open with a sharp tool, and threw an incendiary device inside the vehicle. After the Porsche incident, Kid Cudi testified that he met with Diddy in person. During the conversation, Kid Cudi explained that he had believed Cassie and Diddy were no longer together at the time of their involvement. Diddy remained calm and composed throughout the discussion. As the meeting ended and the two shook hands, Kid Cudi asked, "What about my car?" At that moment, Diddy's expression changed. He stared at Kid Cudi and said, "I don't know what you're talking about." Although Diddy denied any involvement in the arson, Kid Cudi testified that he had always believed Diddy was responsible. During cross-examination, Diddy's defense attorneys challenged this claim. They pointed out that prior to the arson, Kid Cudi had reported a break-in at his home, but admitted to police that he had forgotten to lock the front door before leaving. Regarding the Porsche fire, the defense noted that DNA evidence recovered from the vehicle belonged to a woman, not Diddy. They also emphasized that by the time of the arson, Cassie had already broken up with Kid Cudi and reconciled with Diddy, arguing that there was no clear motive linking Diddy to the incident. On the 12th day of testimony, Diddy's former assistant, Mia, took the stand. She testified that during her time working for Diddy, she was repeatedly physically abused. She described incidents in which Diddy slammed her arm into a door and threw a bucket of ice at her head. She further alleged that she was sexually assaulted multiple times, with the first incident occurring on November 4, 2009, Diddy's 40th birthday. Mia testified that after having 2 drinks with Diddy that night, she suddenly felt disoriented and later woke up the next morning. While she stated she could not be entirely certain what happened, her testimony strongly implied that Diddy was responsible. During cross-examination, Diddy's attorneys questioned her credibility. They asked why, if she had been so deeply traumatized and fearful, she would clearly remember November 4th as a significant date. Yet on November 4th, 2013, 4 years later, she posted a public birthday message to Diddy. The post congratulated him, thanked him for supporting her and welcoming her into his family, called him one of her best friends, praised his sense of humor, and ended with, "I love you," accompanied by a photo from his birthday party. The defense argued that this post undermined her claims. Observers noted a visible shift in the jury's reactions after this evidence was presented. On the 15th day of testimony, hotel security guard Eddie Garcia, who was involved in the 2016 hotel incident, took the stand. He testified that someone representing Diddy contacted him and offered money to obtain the hotel's surveillance footage from that night. Garcia stated that he consulted his supervisor, who quoted a price of $50,000. According to Garcia, the offer was accepted. Despite this, the footage was eventually leaked years later. On the 16th day, Cassie's friend Brianna Bungalan testified. She described an incident involving a balcony. According to her testimony, after Cassie and Diddy had an argument, Cassie returned to her apartment with Brianna. When Diddy aggressively knocked on the door, Cassie eventually opened it. Brianna testified that as soon as Diddy entered, he threw a knife in Cassie's direction, though it missed and did not injure her. When Brianna attempted to intervene, Diddy allegedly threatened her, saying, "I'm the devil. I could kill you." Brianna stated that she then stepped onto the balcony to smoke, at which point Diddy came up behind her, lifted her, and placed her on top of the balcony railing. She testified that her feet were balanced on the narrow ledge as she feared falling from the 17th floor. She said Diddy held her there for 10 to 15 seconds while shouting at her. She later sought medical treatment for injuries to her back and neck, and photographs were entered into evidence dated September 30th, 2016. The defense challenged Brianna's testimony, pointing out that she admitted to using illegal substances on the day of the incident. They also noted that she met with Cassie multiple times to discuss legal action against Diddy before Cassie filed her lawsuit. The defense highlighted inconsistencies between Brianna's account and Cassie's regarding the date and location of the balcony incident. Furthermore, they presented evidence that one of Brianna's injury photos was taken on September 26th at 9:45 a.m., contradicting her stated timeline. Beginning on the 18th day of the trial, another key witness besides Cassie took the stand, an anonymous woman referred to as Jane Doe, one of Diddy's former girlfriends. The two began dating in 2021. Jane Doe testified that she was repeatedly coerced by Diddy into participating in sexual acts similar to the so-called FO sessions, describing her experience as essentially a repeat of Cassie's story. When questioned by the defense, Jane Doe was asked why, if she truly disliked and feared these activities. Text messages showed that she repeatedly agreed to participate. The defense also pointed out that after these encounters, she often stayed with Diddy, lying beside him and watching television together, including her favorite program, Dateline, behavior that did not appear consistent with someone who had just been threatened or coerced. Jane Doe testified that she did not fully understand her own behavior, suggesting that she may have been psychologically manipulated or brainwashed, and stated that she was currently seeing a therapist. Cross-examination and questioning of Jane Doe continued for 6 full days. At the conclusion of her testimony, she unexpectedly stepped forward and hugged both the prosecution and defense attorneys. During the remaining days of the trial, several additional witnesses appeared, including multiple former assistants of Diddy, a legal support expert from the U.S. Attorney's Office, and agents from the Department of Homeland Security. The former assistants largely provided similar testimony, describing preparations for FO sessions, including arranging hotel rooms, supplies, and observing incidents of domestic violence involving both Cassie and Jane Doe. One particularly notable witness was Anaya Senka, a legal support specialist from the U.S. Attorney's Office. She testified that she reviewed all communications in the case, including text messages, photos, images, and videos. This included multiple explicit videos involving Cassie and Jane Doe, some of which were shown to the jury in court. Evidence presented included a text exchange dated January 13, 2013. In that exchange, Cassie proactively contacted a male escort identified as San Diego, one of the men who participated in FO sessions. Cassie asked, "How are you? Are you still in LA?" San Diego replied that he was, and said he wanted to try again what they had done before. Cassie responded affirmatively, noting that although it was late, she was willing. The two ultimately met at a hotel around 3 a.m. This exchange suggested that Cassie was not only willing, but actively initiating participation in FO-related encounters, even reaching out to male participants on her own. On June 24, 2025, the trial reached its final day. Lead defense attorney Mark Agnifilo delivered the closing argument. He stated that the prosecution and defense had presented two entirely different versions of the case. From the defense's perspective, he said, this was a trial about eyewitness testimony, text messages, videos, and concrete evidence. From the prosecution's perspective, however, it was not. Agnifilo argued that after reviewing all the evidence, the jury should conclude that the case had been grossly exaggerated or even fabricated. He asked the jury what the evidence truly showed. Adults engaging in consensual behavior and personal drug use, nothing more. He criticized the prosecution for attempting to turn private adult behavior and personal drug use into an elaborate racketeering conspiracy. He challenged the prosecution's claim that Diddy's business constituted a criminal enterprise, asking whether any witness had testified that they were part of a racketeering organization. He emphasized that no employee or associate had admitted to participating in any racketeering conspiracy. Agnifilo concluded that the relationships between Diddy and the alleged victims were consensual and did not constitute racketeering conspiracy. He characterized the entire proceeding as a fake trial. The trial lasted a total of 32 court days, spanning 51 days, including weekends and holidays. On July 1, 2025, the jury, composed of 8 men and 4 women, deliberated for an entire day. They were initially unable to reach a unanimous decision on the racketeering conspiracy charge, but had reached conclusions on the other counts. On July 2nd, after further deliberation, the jury returned its final verdict. They unanimously found Diddy not guilty of racketeering conspiracy and not guilty of forced sex trafficking. He was found guilty only of interstate transportation for illegal sexual activity involving Cassie and Jane Doe. Upon hearing the verdict, Diddy's family members became emotional, embracing one another and crying. Diddy himself turned, leaned over his chair, closed his eyes, and appeared to pray silently. Although he was convicted on 2 lesser charges that carried a theoretical maximum sentence of 10 years, the most serious charges had been avoided. This outcome represented one of the best possible results Diddy could have hoped for under the circumstances. Because the case was tried in federal court, Diddy was subject to a federal risk assessment system. Prosecutors classified him as a level 24 risk, considered high risk, and sought a sentence of 5 years. The defense argued his risk level was only 16, stating that as a public figure, Diddy posed no flight risk due to passport confiscation and restrictions on private travel,
and requested a 2-year sentence.
Looking back at this trial, aside from the verdict itself, several noteworthy details stand out. First and foremost, there is no denying that money makes a difference. Diddy had immense financial resources, and the elite legal team he assembled delivered exactly the results one would expect. His defense team consisted of 9 attorneys, filling 2 full rows in the courtroom. Each lawyer had a clearly defined role, and each executed their responsibilities with precision. One key figure was Linda Moreno, who was responsible for jury selection. Her task was to screen potential jurors and identify those most likely to be favorable to the defense. Jury selection, after all, is a critical art. Different individuals can interpret the same facts in entirely different ways. Once the jury was seated, the case shifted to 2 senior trial attorneys, Alexandra Shapiro and Xavier Donaldson. Shapiro previously served as a senior advisor in the U.S. Department of Justice's Office of Legal Counsel and as Deputy Chief of the Appeals Division in the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office. Donaldson was a former New York State prosecutor with over 30 years of trial experience. Both attorneys had spent many years inside prosecutors' offices before entering private practice, giving them an intimate understanding of prosecutorial strategy, priorities, and vulnerabilities. One telling detail was that while the prosecution called more than 30 witnesses during the trial, the defense did not call a single witness of its own. Instead, they focused entirely on cross-examination, and the strategy proved remarkably effective. For the racketeering conspiracy charge, the most serious accusation in the case, Diddy's team brought in Brian Steele, a prominent Atlanta-based attorney known for his expertise in RICO cases. Steele has represented numerous high-profile clients, including rapper Young Thug. Based on the final verdict, hiring Steele was clearly a strategic success. The forced sex trafficking charge was handled primarily by Tenny Garagos, a young but formidable attorney. Her background was notable. She is the daughter of famed defense attorney Mark Garagos, who has represented clients in cases involving Michael Jackson, Chris Brown, and Hunter Biden. In this trial, Tenny Garagos stood out for her confidence, clarity, and command of the courtroom. The jury's relatively quick rejection of the forced trafficking charge reflected the effectiveness of her arguments. Leading the entire defense team was Mark Agnifilo. Earlier in the case, his comments to the media, including remarks about buying baby oil at Costco, had drawn ridicule. However, his courtroom performance demonstrated why he is regarded as one of the top defense attorneys in the country. Agnifilo coordinated the defense strategy, assembled specialists across legal disciplines, and managed the team with precision. His firm has handled numerous major cases, including the widely publicized Luigi Mangione case, which he defended alongside his wife. Agnifilo framed the case as one of adult consent and personal choice. In discussing Jane Doe and Cassie, he portrayed their relationships with Diddy as flawed but voluntary. He argued that while jurors might disapprove of the lifestyle or moral choices involved, disapproval does not equate to criminality. In contrast, the prosecution team, though experienced, appeared outmatched. Viewers who followed the trial closely noted that the prosecutor's presentations were often dry and lacked impact. In some instances, jurors were reportedly seen struggling to stay attentive during the prosecution's arguments, while the defense's presentations were consistently more engaging and accessible. Ultimately, regardless of rhetoric or courtroom charisma, evidence remained the deciding factor. From the proceedings as presented, the prosecution struggled to deliver a cohesive and persuasive narrative, proving the most serious charges. There was ample evidence that Diddy had engaged in violent behavior, including surveillance footage. However, federal court jurisdiction did not allow prosecution for domestic violence. Such charges would fall under state or local courts. Evidence of drug abuse was also present, but prosecutors likely recognized that those offenses alone would carry minimal penalties. The prosecution relied heavily on the testimony of Cassie and Jane Doe. Yet the evidence demonstrated that both women had actively participated in FO sessions, even if violence occurred during the relationships. In the eyes of the jury, this appeared insufficient to establish forced sex trafficking or racketeering conspiracy under federal law. Despite being convicted on 2 lesser charges, the judge denied Diddy's request for bail. Pending his sentencing hearing, scheduled for October, he is expected to remain in custody. It is also important to note that this federal case does not prevent additional civil or state-level lawsuits. Numerous alleged victims have already indicated intentions to pursue further legal action. Even if Diddy ultimately serves limited prison time, his legal battles are far from over. As the case concludes, opinions remain deeply divided. Some believe Diddy narrowly escaped justice through wealth and legal firepower. Others believe the evidence simply did not support the most severe accusations. What is your view of the case? Do you believe Diddy was fortunate or wrongfully accused? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, take care of yourselves. We'll see you next time.